Now, what I would ask, what I'm curious with you and other people, you're homeschooling your kids. When your kids get older and they start exploring things more on their own or whatever, you said they don't have these notions now. I mean, sometimes, especially too, actually, late stage adolescents, people in college age, they can integrate new ideas in a more profound way than they could even just a few years earlier in their life. A lot of times college age people, they just experience any new idea that comes to them that they're not familiar with as something amazing or something really deep, because they weren't exposed to it before. And especially too, if they haven't had a good relationship with their parents, if they associate their parents with certain things, and they have a tendency to want to like push back against their parents, they might be looking for excuses to do it in this type of thing. So, I mean, how number one, do you think about this? Like if your kids become more exposed one day, how are they going to be psychologically prepared for that? And what would be your advice to other parents as well, as pre-prepping kids to not be fooled by that type of thing when they get older?
Well, I don't agree with the idea of sheltering your children and not exposing them to certain ideas. I think that, and the way that this happens really organically for us, given because we homeschool, and my wife Khalid, she homeschools and she writes about it on her social media channels. And we have a homeschooling curriculum that we sell actually for Al-Asna Institute. And it's we call it Quranic homeschooling. And basically the primary thing that we're teaching our children, starting from the age of 4 or 5, has been Quran, memorizing Quran. And so they're memorizing, starting with the short surahs, and they're memorizing it with meaning, with, okay, what is the meaning of these verses that you're memorizing? What do these words mean? And the surprising thing, or it might not be surprising to many of you, but for maybe me, it was surprising that how much of these modern ideologies are actually addressed, like the core of them are addressed in even the short surah of the Quran, because they're just still in the latter 10th in their memorization journey, but already they have come across a lot of these kinds of ideas, like the idea that death is the end and there's nothing after death. How many times in the last half or the latter 10th of the Quran in the short surahs is that explicitly addressed? Like the Quran is quoting the kuffar, Allah is quoting the kuffar as saying that we're just going to be turned into bones and dust, and of course we're not going to be resurrected. And these are just stories of old, like putting down the past. So this addresses atheism, it addresses progressivism, also the idea of iman and kufr, and those who disbelieve, and including Ahlul Kitab, including the mushrikeen. What is shirk? And that 100% addresses all of these kind of interfaith issues, interfaith, and all religions are the same and there's no really substantive difference. So if the child is learning these these verses of the Quran, they're understanding the meaning, and they also have they're basically, the Quran is forming their understanding of the world and their framing of the world in a very beautiful way that meshes completely with the fitrah that they have. Even gender differences, and because we also some basic hadith that you can teach children and they just get it, like it makes sense, like different gender roles. The hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, kullukum ra'in, like all of you are shepherds, and the husband or the father is responsible for his wife and his children, and the wife or the mother is responsible for her house, for the household and her children. So there's gender roles in that hadith, and we teach that to our kids, and it makes complete sense. And then they start talking about because then we'll mention, like, did you know that some people actually disagree with this idea?
Yeah.
That people in society, and it'll like click for them because they have relatives that are
Yep.
under the influence of liberalism, and they'll say, yeah, that's so silly. That doesn't make sense. Like, how can that make sense?
Mhm.
It's very obvious to a child that a man and a woman is not the same thing. So that's the kind of approach that
Yep.
we've taken, is really allowing the Quran to dictate these concepts, like, so that they have a very solid aqidah based on the Quran and hadith, and then everything falls into place. Basically, there's nothing new. Like with these Western ideologies, the root cause, like the root problem or defect in understanding, has been addressed by the Quran. That's what we've found through our experience.
MashaAllah. Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out.
Actually, I want to emphasize that this thing you're saying of, there's some people who think this and some people who think that. That is a really important thing for our parents to get a grip of, that you have to do with kids, because that way, even as you said, it will trigger with kids when they've seen things, but even if they haven't been exposed to something later, when they see it later, then it will trigger with them. This is what mom and dad were talking about, and this is what the Quran was talking about when mom and dad made that connection to me, and then their confidence in it increases, as opposed to it being something that overwhelms them, and again they feel like they need to go, you get shut in, and they just get defensive about.